of power and making sure that every Kenyan feels represented. And the president, of course, in his previous addresses, he has addressed matters touching on security. He has also addressed matters touching on education. There is a lot happening. The schools are being opened this week, and recently the government did introduce insurance cover for school-going children. A new curriculum is in the pipeline. Of course, it has been partly rolled out. We do expect that in a couple of years from now, that is, the insurers are on strike. Of course, yesterday the president, in his speech, which was delivered to the nation on Labor Day, did suggest that there is need for dialogue so that the outstanding issues can be ironed out. The lecturers have been away from work for a couple of weeks, and it is a strike that is ongoing, with the lecturers insisting that unless the government comes forward with a counter offer, they are not going to go back to lecture halls. That is a story which has been covered extensively by the Channel One News. But this afternoon we can only speculate what the president is going to talk about. Of course, the famous handshake between him and opposition leader Raila Odinga, quite a tongue twister there. And now, if you don't mind, John Jacob Kiria, I want to speak to Lamu West Member of Parliament Stanley Mudhama. Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. A lot is expected from the president generally, starting with yesterday when the minister did announce of 5% increment. I know employers are really happy because at first they were opposed to that particular increment, but the president did go ahead, and what he did. I know some Kenyans are not satisfied, but as Parliament, what do you expect? I know different members have had different takes on this, but according to you, what do you expect today?
Well, I would say I'm the Member of Parliament in Lamu West, from Lamu West, and I want to take this opportunity to thank the members of Lamu West and those who elected us as leaders together with others. But much more so to respond to your question is that we are happy about this increment, because before the president makes such an implementation, there are many factors which are put in consideration. So, and we appreciate that going by our economic status at the moment and the situation at hand, 5% is good, because next year we'll get another additional, and we move on like that. Yeah, so it is encouraging. I'm in full support of this.
All right. Lamu is part of those areas where the rain is pounding. We know that Tana River, there are people who are being told to evacuate to higher grounds. Garissa is in a mess, and most of the parts are submerged underwater. Do you think the president would address that as well today?
Yes, we expect the president to address this issue of heavy downpour which has affected Lamu, and also Lamu West, in areas that are neighboring the Tana River, that is Chanalumba, Moa, Didawaride, and the like, or going all the way to Lake Kenyatta and all the way to areas to do with Pandango areas. So we expect the president to address this issue, and we are also getting assistance from the Ministry of Devolution. This morning we were with the minister addressing us on those issues, and we are waiting. And also Wananchi, we have prepared them and we have told them to move in the high lands, so that in case of this kind of emergencies, we avoid or we rescue life and livestock as well.
All right. Kenya is playing a very critical role in ensuring that the region is safe. KDF are part of the AMISOM forces in Somalia trying to fight the Al-Shabaab. Lamu has borne the brunt of the Al-Shabaab attacks. Areas such as Pandango, Peketoni, and other areas. I know that there is some normalcy returning, but there's still that fear, people living in fear of some reprisals by the Al-Shabaab militants. Do you think the president will give us a status update on that fight against insecurity in parts of Lamu?
Yes, we expect the president to address the issue of security, and also the issue to do with the Al-Shabaab and the attacks which have been there. But we also want to thank the president and the deputy president because of the initiative they have taken this far. We have not had these incidences since a couple of maybe 1 year, 1.5 years. And currently we are enjoying a lot of security. and the measures, the government has taken enough measures to do with the security. But much more so, we also want to thank the government because of giving our home guards the guns to protect this, to be just for preparation and being aware, and also the measures that of the construction of the boundary wall, the preparation which are security related, and also all this has culminated to us enjoying the security. And we want to say Lamu is no longer a terrorist area. Right. The security has fully improved.
And in terms of education, there are a number of projects which have been initiated both by the government and both by the private sector in areas such as Lamu. The government has rolled out, at least in some parts of the country, the new curriculum which has been fought by some quarters, but there is that optimism from the government that this is a system that will pay. Coming from a place such as Lamu, how important is this, and how careful should the government be in terms of ensuring that everyone from Lamu West is on board?
One, we agree the new curriculum is good, but in Lamu West we have a challenge with the infrastructure. So we want the government to invest also as much in the infrastructure. This is for the lower primary and upper primary and high school, and also in the technical institutions. So we can say we are quite good in this area. We are doing very badly in terms of the infrastructure, but we also don't want to see the delocalization issue aspect of teachers being moved from one area to, because we are having problems with the teachers. So if you remove the few teachers, the few principals we have, and you take them to other counties instead of adding us teachers, then we'll be in problems. So this is the only area that we want the government to make sure that they don't remove teachers who are already used to this situation, but rather give us more teachers. And apart from giving us more teachers, they also support and put more infrastructure in this area so that we can enjoy and team up and come up also the best among the best, because we haven't been doing very well in terms of education for quite a long time.
All right. And this particular address is coming at a time when Parliament is enjoying some new found cohesion between part of the opposition. You know that within NASA there are parties which have made it very clear that they are not really a party to the agreement which was entered between the President and the opposition leader. But according to you, how important is this particular cohesion now that the President is going to address a united House?
One, Jubilee government, which is a government that I support. The manifesto of Jubilee is to bring peace, is to bring cohesion. So this is in accordance to the manifesto. The only thing I would tell Kenyans is not to dig too much into this. Give our president and the deputy president time to organize and put things in order, because every house must be put in order. We cannot just have a house. A house must be put in order. So the initiative that the president and the deputy president is taking and the other leaders is for sure meant to bring cohesion and to move this country forward.
All right. Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. That is Lamu West Member of Parliament Stanley Mudama just giving us his take on what he expects the President to deliver upon this afternoon. Just a quick reminder, JJ, I have today's order paper. It is one of those days that, a quick one, JJ. It is one of those days where the order paper comes in just one day. What we do expect is the normal prayers, and then after that there will be a convocation by the Speaker of the Senate, followed by the Speaker of the National Assembly, and the Speaker of the National Assembly, Justin Muturi, is going to be inviting the President to deliver the State of the Nation address. And after the President is done, there will be an adjournment by the Speaker of the Senate. The Senate, we do expect the Senate to reconvene. The National Assembly will be going to its month-long recess. After this, I think it will be tomorrow, but they will be holding a morning sitting and an afternoon sitting, and then after the National Assembly will be taking that particular recess. Back to you, JJ. We do expect the President now to arrive here any moment. I'm sure you're going to be keeping our viewers up to date.
Good afternoon. You are watching live pictures from Parliament buildings in Nairobi. It is inside the National Assembly chambers where we are having a joint sitting of Parliament, a sitting of both the Senate and the National Assembly, convened for the purposes of the State of the Nation address to be delivered by His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta this afternoon. And according to the program, inspecting a guard of honor that will be mounted for this specific occasion. And then, of course, he will make his way to the chambers for this particular sitting. About 10 minutes ago, the Deputy President, William Ruto, arrived in Parliament. He was received by the speakers of both houses, as well as members of the House leadership. And he is on standby, ready to receive the President once he arrives. The State of the Nation address is a requirement of the Constitution of Kenya, Article 132, 1B and C, that requires the President to inform the nation of the measures taken and progress achieved in realization of national values, progress made in fulfilling Kenya's international obligation, and the state of our nation's security. And of course, this will be the first State of the Nation address delivered by His Excellency the President since re-election for a second term. And this afternoon, he is expected to enumerate on measures being taken by the government with emphasis on the Big Four agenda that focuses on manufacturing, food security, universal health care, and affordable housing. He is also expected to lay out steps being taken towards enhancing national cohesion. And this follows the now infamous handshake on the 9th of March between His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga that was meant to end the political hostility following the disputed 2017 general elections. Just recently, last week to be exact, the two leaders did appoint a 14-member advisory team and the Banner Building Bridges initiative that is expected to spearhead initiatives geared towards national cohesion. Some of the key areas that Kenyans expect this particular address to touch on include education, security, health, corruption, and even the economy, all which were captured last year during that address. As per your screen, members of both houses already in the chambers, seated, waiting for that address. And also expected to attend this particular joint sitting as guests, of course, are a cross-section of invited guests, including high commissioners and ambassadors, cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, heads of constitutional commissions and independent bodies, heads of state corporations, former speakers, clerks, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, now within the presence of Parliament. He has just arrived. He's received there by the Deputy President, William Ruto. Going through the motions of greetings. And of course, any moment now, he shall be making his way to the chambers where members of both houses, the Senate and the National Assembly, are seated waiting. Sights and sounds from Parliament buildings in Nairobi, where any moment now we expect His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta to deliver the State of the Nation address. The President having arrived here at 40 minutes past 2 p.m. He, of course, proceeded to inspect a guard of honor. That was after both national anthems were sung, the Kenyan national anthem and the East African Community National Anthem. The President on your screen now, accompanied by speakers of both houses, Honorable Kenneth Lusaka of the Senate, Honorable Justin Muturi of the National Assembly. Also accompanying that entourage, members of the House leadership, the deputy speakers of both houses, Honorable Aden Duale, Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen, clerks of the National Assembly, Mr. Michael Sialai and Mr. Jeremiah Nyengenye of the Senate. And any moment now, they shall be making their way to the National Assembly chambers, where a joint sitting of Parliament is convened, a sitting of the National Assembly and the Senate. And the only order of business this afternoon is the State of the Nation address. It will be the first by His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta since re-election last year. And it is expected to lay emphasis on the Big Four agenda, which is what he is focusing on in his second and last term. And the key areas there are manufacturing, food security, universal healthcare, and affordable housing. A brief recap of a similar address delivered on the 15th of March, 2017. It was his fourth and final address in his first term. And in that particular State of the Nation address, the President highlighted education, where he said his administration had succeeded in delivering honest exams in the year 2016. A ratio of 1 officer for every 450 citizens. On healthcare, the President did confirm that there is an increase in the number of Kenyans accessing outpatient medical care through the National Hospital Insurance Fund from 3.8 million shillings, million people rather, in 2013 to 5.8 million people in 2017. And in this very year, 2018, this particular cover has been extended to students in public secondary schools effective today, which is the day schools countrywide reopen for the second term. And of course, still on healthcare, the country is expecting at least 100 specialist doctors from Cuba, and this follows an agreement reached between the Cuban government and the Kenyan government. On the issue of employment, job creation, last year, the President noted that the economic environment was stable, and it had been so for the last 4 years, seeing the creation of 2.3 million new jobs, that the GDP had expanded to a strong average, an annual growth rate of 5.9% since 2013, that against a global average of 3%. And of course, that particular speech also dwelled on devolution and acknowledging the fact that 4 years after implementation of the devolved units, 11 billion shillings had been accessed by close to 1 million young Kenyans, and that there was a strong collaboration between the national and county governments that had seen the increase of shareable revenues from 15% to 34%. Through this cooperation, county governments have had access to conditional grants in areas such as health and water. And there is also transfer. Those are some of the areas that the president is expected to focus on in his State of the Nation address this afternoon. That, in addition to spelling out measures being taken by government towards enhancing national cohesion, towards ensuring that Kenyans forge ahead in unity and focus on one agenda, which is developing the nation. Members of both houses sitting calmly, waiting for that moment. Senators and members of parliament. Live pictures brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. And as mentioned earlier, there is only one business listed on the order paper this afternoon. And according to the program, once the president makes his way into the chambers, we shall have prayers by the Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Kenneth Lusaka. It will be followed by a convocation by the same Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Lusaka. It will be followed by another by his National Assembly counterpart, Honorable Justin Muturi, who will then invite His Excellency the President to make his address. After that address, the Speaker of the Senate shall proceed to adjourn the Senate, and the Speaker of the National Assembly shall proceed to adjourn sittings of the National Assembly. And what will follow thereafter will be a reception at the main Parliament courtyard. Right about now, His Excellency the President, that is the tradition. It has been on the last 4 occasions that he has been in these very chambers to deliver the State of the Nation address. And without a doubt, that same process is being undertaken today. This particular speech is one that Kenyans are waiting for eagerly, coming barely hours after the government announced a 5% increase to the minimum wage, and a section of the public were of the opinion that indeed focus should be on reducing the cost of living, and perhaps that will be contained in this particular address as well. Members of the House leadership making their way into the chamber. National Assembly Leader of Majority, Honorable Aden Duale, there. His Senate counterpart, Kipchumba Murkomen. Members of the Speaker's panels as well. A clear indication that any moment now, His Excellency the President will be making his way to the chambers. This particular address, enshrined in the Constitution of Kenya, Article 132, it says the President shall address a special sitting of Parliament once every year and address The president is also expected to highlight or mention progress made in fulfilling Kenya's international obligations. And this could be by way of conventions signed by the country or ratifications. He is also expected to inform Wananchi on the state of the nation's security. And this is security that covers all sectors of the country's economy. The Deputy President there making his way to the gallery from where he shall follow proceedings alongside other invited guests who include High Commissioners, Ambassadors, Cabinet Secretaries, Principal Secretaries, heads of constitutional commissions and independent bodies. Also invited are heads of state corporations, former speakers of the National Assembly, of the Senate that came into being following promulgation of the new constitution in 2010, representatives of the Mau Mau War Veterans Associations have also been invited to this joint sitting of Parliament to follow live the proceedings as the President delivers the State of the Nation address. Members of the Youth Parliament also invited, and a section of the public are also here, all seated in the gallery. And they will also get that opportunity of following the proceedings live from inside the National Assembly chambers. Members of both houses using this opportunity to catch up, comparing notes of how the 12th Parliament, the second session, is unfolding. Majority are new members of Parliament and new senators. And so for them, this is still a learning process of how legislation and legislative matters in the country are undertaken. The Sergeant-at-Arms on standby. Both inside and outside the chambers. The walkway clearing. And the procession approaching, as beamed live on your screen. His Excellency the President, Uhuru Kenyatta, flanked by the speakers of both houses, approaching the National Assembly chambers. And any moment now, that procession shall be coming right through the doors and into the chambers. A live broadcast made possible by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. My name is Vereso Mwanga, and on behalf of the entire crew, President Uhuru Kenyatta, President of the Republic of Kenya.
Parapanda hiyo msikilizaji, kuashiria kwamba sasa wa Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki
call to leadership positions in this republic. We seek guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberations in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests we have committed to our charge. Amen. Your Excellency, Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta, President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Kenya Defense Forces, the Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Justin Muturi, Honorable Members of Parliament. Article 132(1)(b) of the Constitution of Kenya requires the President to address a special sitting of the Parliament of Kenya once every year and at any other time. Further, Article 132(1)(c) requires the President to, among others, once every year, report in an address to the nation all the measures taken and the progress achieved in the realization of the national values set out in Article 10 of the Constitution. In addition, Article 247 of the Constitution requires the President, in his capacity as the chairperson of the National Security Council, to report to Parliament annually on the state of the security of the Republic. In this regard, pursuant to Article 132(1)(b) and (c) 1 and 2 of the Constitution and Senate Standing Order number 22(1) and 2, upon a request by His Excellency the President, via letter reference number OP CAB 140, dated 9th April 2018, I gave notice of today's to the Honorable Senators by Gazette Notice number 3551, which was published in the Kenya Gazette on 17 April 2018. Accordingly, Honorable Members, this special sitting is formally convened.
Joint permission, that before I proceed any further, let me at this early juncture pay tribute to the late Kenneth Matiba, whose patriotism inspired greatly the Constitution under whose authority we meet today. It was all resolved to emulate the example he set and his desire for a strong, prosperous, and inclusive Kenya. Mr. Speaker, it is right and fitting to look back on the achievements of the 11th Parliament before setting out our plans for this Parliament. The 11th Parliament was charged with the task of implementing our new Constitution, making enabling laws to create institutions which the new constitutional order called for. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt established, and as such, the new constitutional order is in place. I take this opportunity to thank your predecessors for discharging their duty so well. Now, honorable speakers, let me congratulate your members, both the newly elected and the returning ones, for winning the trust of the Kenyan people. Honorable members, you and I owe our presence here today to Kenyans who chose us to represent them. The trust that they have bestowed on us is sacred, but we must always remember that as leaders, we do not serve only those who voted for us. We serve all Kenyans as required by our Constitution. Honorable Speakers, honorable members, the Constitution that brings us here for this address is actually a guide, an instruction and a tool to help us craft a Kenya that is freer, fairer, wealthier, and more united. Indeed, today, let us consider whether we have preserved, protected, and honored it. And I believe we have. Our constitutional order is stable, it is secure, and it is growing in strength. Devolution is no longer a baby. It is now an established framework for governing and delivering public services. 5 years of establishing the county governments have taught Kenyans what they want of devolution and how to get it. And overall, the government, that is both levels, national as well as our new county governments, are becoming more responsive to the needs of Kenyans as we hoped it would happen when we passed our new law. Honorable Speakers, there is no doubt there have been some challenges in the use of public resources, with some individuals fraudulently and corruptly diverting public resources to benefit themselves. But we are building preventative tools and ways for our citizens to become more involved in reporting graft. My administration, and I must emphasize, that despite these challenges, has remained committed to the implementation of devolution. We are today far above the 15% threshold for resource allocations to our counties provided for by the Constitution. From an allocation of Kenya shillings 210 billion in the financial year 2013-14, we now stand at Kenya shillings 327 billion for the financial year 2017-18, an increase of 56% in 5 years. I also recently signed the Division of Revenue Bill 2018, which sets aside some Kenya shillings 372 billion for counties in the coming financial year 2018-19. The national government, also during our period, complemented county service delivery in the reporting year by injecting Kenya shillings 9.6 billion for the managed equipment services, Kenya shillings 5.2 billion for free maternity, and Kenya shillings 900 million for user fees. Moreover, 2 billion shillings was distributed to 11 counties from the Equalization Fund to improve services. In addition, from registration services such as identity cards to NSSF and NHIF services, amongst others, closer to the people. Kenyans believe in devolution, and my administration has matched that belief with strong and tangible support. Honorable Speakers, honorable members, I now turn to the urgent matter of how we live our constitutional values as a people. This before I report on their expression in governance. Kenya is a country of God-fearing and generous people. In our moments of need, we are kept going by the compassion and empathy of our countrymen and women. Indeed, it goes without saying that most of us are honest to a fault and intolerant of the fraudulent. In our private lives, we live together. Whatever corner of the country we call home, whatever language we speak, and whatever faith we subscribe to. In other words, the Kenyan people are ahead of us, their leaders. This, honorable members, must change. Leaders at every level of government must demonstrate a desire and a commitment to serve. And in particular, we must all maintain the highest level of integrity. Those days when one could enjoy public goods without fear that action will be taken against you are gone. And indeed, to demonstrate this point, last year, ill-gotten public assets valued at approximately Kenya shillings 500 million were recovered, and civil proceedings were instituted for the preservation and recovery of other assets valued at more than Kenya shillings 6 billion. To deepen good governance, we have continued to digitize key services to seal loopholes used for fraud. And indeed, I do expect that the new officials whom we have worked together to put in office, both in prosecution and investigations, will bring cases against all, including the powerful and privileged, to show Kenyans that none of us are above the law. Indeed, through the Chief Justice who is with us today, I also urge the judiciary to do their part to ensure that orders are not frivolously used by individuals to avoid justice. And I also urge you, honorable members, to give us the legal tools we need to win the war against the Lords of Graft. Having made these efforts, I want to repeat what every Kenyan in their heart of heart knows, that we must come together to fight this vice if we are to conquer it. The government and the private sector also must report fraud, protect whistleblowers without the slightest hesitation. Kenyans, on their part too, must report any crimes they may come across. And indeed, families must feel ashamed by one of their members becoming involved in corruption, and they must insist on upholding the name of their family. Teachers, as well as parents, must explicitly teach our children the value of honesty and the concept of honor. It is only by coming together in this way as a people to position Kenya to join the league of prosperous nations. Honorable members, these constitutional advances must of course be paid for, and so it is natural to turn our attention to the economy. Where goals are concerned, honorable members, I believe all of us, irrespective of our political persuasion, are in broad agreement. And indeed, some of them are constitutional requirements in their own right. None of us today in this august House will have forgotten that last year was an election year, or that our region was severely affected by drought. Despite this, honorable members, it is encouraging to note that despite these challenges, our economy remained resilient. Our real gross domestic product grew by some 4.9% in 2017, much higher than the 3.6% for world real GDP and 2.6% for sub-Saharan Africa. Even more encouraging was the performance of our tourism sector. Tourism earnings grew some 20%, proof that even when our politics were at their hottest, Kenya kept its visitors' confidence. We remain on course to meet the tests that Kenyans set for us. But we must admit that we still have a very long way to go, and deeper reflection is therefore called for. Mothers, and raised deliveries by skilled attendants from 44% in 2013 to 66% in 2017. Access to antiretroviral drugs to expectant mothers has significantly increased, and today, 94% of HIV-positive expectant mothers attending antenatal clinics across access the AR willing to work with the national government